we're back with our first game with Jund Creativity in the modern format. Jund Creativity, obviously, a little bit better mana base than the 5-color version. The downside of not quite having as powerful of options like things like Spell Pierce, Teferi, Time Raveler, etc. So you trade in a little bit easier mana base for a little bit less functionality in some of the game plays. But we'll take a look at our first match with Jund Creativity, and we unfortunately lost the die roll. Taking a look at the opening hand here. Opponent reveals Gigantha as a companion. This hand has a lot of unknowns. We obviously have Thoughtseize into Bitter Reanimator Bolt. So we have interaction for our opponent's hand. We have ways to see card selection here. So even though we don't have a creativity in this hand is pretty reasonable. Obviously, Thoughtseize can be used to disrupt our opponent. Bolt can deal with any early Ragavans or anything. So, hand seems like a pretty solid keep overall in the dark against an unknown opponent. Okay, opponent did mull to 6. And we see that they are on Tron. We Thoughtseize them. They reveal Ancient Stirrings, Karn Liberated, Warping Wail. So, not the best Tron hand, honestly. They kept a hand without the ability to cast Ancient Stirrings or a second Tron land, so they probably honestly should have mulliganed this hand. Warping Wail could be a little bit awkward, trying to cast Creativity later on. Karn Liberated obviously can be a problem once they get that down, but I think the take here is probably Ancient Stirrings to try to keep them from finding Tron as long as possible. See if I agree with my past self. Nope, I take Warping Wail. So, interesting choice. I do think Ancient Stirrings might have been the better thing. Just prevent them from finding Tron lands as long as you can, but they play Sanctum of Ugin and play Chromatic Star, play Ancient Stirrings, finding Power Plant. So, once again, I said we should have taken Ancient Stirrings, and they draw a star into casting Stirrings to find Power Plant, so they find their second Tron land. We go ahead, probably cast Bitter Reunion here, pitching, I would guess, Bolt or a land. We pitch Bolt, pass to them, they play the Tron land. We have nothing really here to do but cast Fable. Cast Fable, start getting the ball rolling here, hopefully looking for, but they're going to have Karn this turn, so we use Karn to go get nothing. They exile our Fable. We get a little bit lucky here to find our Creativity. We go ahead and attack with that, which means we'll get to Fable them twice, or Creativity them twice. Get some Archons. Draw a Boseiju, which is nice next turn if they don't have a big bomb here besides Wormcoil Engine. However, looks like they hit a big Whopper, and the Whopper was named Ulamog. So we know they still have a copy of Wormcoil Engine in hand, and they go get a second Ulamog, which means we're in a world of trouble here. So we really don't have anything. We take the other Ulamog, go ahead and Boseiju them off Tron. They attack, exile us for a bunch of cards, including one more copy of Archon. We have 3 copies of Creativity left in our 16 card deck, it looks like. So they continue doing Tron things. They, of course, find Tron, because that's what their deck does. Wormcoil Engine, which is relevant, but also not. We don't draw anything here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So if I had still a fetchable land in deck, we could have potentially tried to cycle this Proving Ground, but we really have no way to do all this in one turn, because we would need 7 mana to be able to cycle this, find a third copy of Bitter Reunion, and persist back the Archon. So, unfortunately, game 1 goes to Tron and the Clang in the background. All right, game number 2. As far as sideboarding, board out the Fatal Pushes and the Bolts for some of our other utility cards. Mainly bringing in the 2 Emeralds, or the 2 Sarah's Emissaries to be able to protect from Planeswalkers, potentially, or creatures. Obviously, Bolts and Fatal Pushes just don't do anything. Veil of Summer does nothing in this matchup. Leyline of the Void just doesn't do anything. So, alright, taking a look at our opening hand here on the play. We have an Archon, a Bitter Reunion, and Creativity. The only thing awkward about this hand is the presence of Basic Swamp, making it difficult potentially to get Creativity off on 4. But other than that, this hand's pretty reasonable, and we can always pitch the Archon to Bitter Reunion here. So, put Mulligans to 6, Mulligans to 5. We go ahead, play our fetch out, and pass. There's going to be some. They play Boseiju, which is interesting. We get the Proving Grounds. So, actually, let's take a look at what the cards we boarded in. We boarded in Nature's Claims to kind of pick off potentially some of their maps and stuff. Also, ways to blow up basically maps and such. Maybe get something like an Ensnaring Bridge if they have Karn, Pithing Needle, those kind of things. And we brought in the Sarah's Emissaries. We also have the 2 copies of Boseiju. So, you know, as far as the list overall, because unfortunately I seem to have lost the list that I originally had or deleted or something. But, you know, for early interaction, we have Thoughtseize. We have a couple copies of Terminate in our deck, simply because it can help slow down things like Wormcoil Engine potentially. And then, you know, Fable Game Plan. We have a couple copies of Persist, or full 4 copies of Persist as ways to reanimate. So we're both reanimation deck and a creativity deck in one. So that's kind of one of the nice things about this version. But all right, and presumably we're going to cast Run 6 here. Just continue to work towards creativity. Opponent plays Sylvan Scrying, gets Tower. We cast Bitter Reunion, pitching Archon, getting another land back. They play Oblivion Stone. This is where the Nature's Claim is going to be quite nice. We go ahead and persist back the Archon. Of course, draw another Archon. Give this haste. Threaten our opponent as quickly as possible. And they have a Karn the Great, Karn Liberated. They presumably exile our Archon. We go ahead and creativity here for 2. This will empty their hand, kill their thing, and they just concede from here. So, interesting game. They still had Tron on turn 4, and we were still able to interact with them just enough with the Nature's Claim to avoid them having an Oblivion Stone in play. So, let's go to game 3, see if we can win this match. Alright, here for game number 3, see if we change any further sideboarding. Does not look like it. Looks like we continue to go with the plan that we already had. So, let's go ahead and take a look at our opening hand. Opponent chooses to play first. We have an okay hand, double Thoughtseize, Nature's Claim to disrupt them. A little bit awkward, you know, we need to draw lands, but we do have Fable potentially into creativity. So, opponent leads on that into that. So, we go and grab, or play Stomping Ground, Nature's Claim their map. Opponent has Tron lined up, it looks like. We will go ahead and cast Thoughtseize. Our life total is going to be plenty low. Opponent casts a Warping Wail to protect their hand. We go ahead and cast Fable the Mirror Breaker. It's possible we should have cast Thoughtseize here, but it just feels like Fable is the right thing to get doing. Don't know if they top decked that or if they already had it. We go ahead and pitch Terminate and Thoughtseize. Go ahead and attack with a token here. They have a second Warping Wail, so we at least cleared the way for We named planeswalkers here. Creatures may have been the correct name, but I guess in the end it doesn't matter because they have Oblivion Stone to blow everything up. And then they have Relic of Progenitus. So we go ahead and fetch. We're going to have another creativity here. Seems like we're in an okay spot. Although maybe we're just supposed to have Archons. Once again, we need Planeswalkers. Opponent does nothing. Play Bitter Reunion, pitching Swamp into Bitter Reunion plus Dwarven Mine. Hit them for 7. Okay, opponent continues to chip away with the Relic, which isn't particularly relevant, but then they draw a Wormcoil Engine, so we would kind of wish we would have named creature here. We play Bitter Reunion, pitching Fable. We draw Archon, which 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm gonna really want to draw a basic here. So we use Nature's Claim to blow that up. They have a second Wormcoil Engine. We have another Boseiju to potentially buy us time. But once again, if we had named creatures instead of planeswalkers here, really the only planeswalker we're worried about is Karn Liberated in terms of protection from. So if we named creatures, we probably would have won this game quite easily. But I forgot to block here. Would have bought us potentially another turn. That blowing up with Boseiju. So I completely skipped the combat step. Could have blocked here, blown one of these up. However, you know, I think the key mistake was not naming creature. The plus side of Planeswalker, you get protected from Karn Liberated, which obviously is a 4 in their deck. If you name creature, you get protection from Wormcoil Engines and Ulamogs. So it's kind of a toss-up there. They might have 2 to 3 Wormcoil Engines usually in their 75, and then we obviously saw that they had at least 2 copies of Ulamog. So, you know, do you want protection from Planeswalkers, or do you want protection for Karn Liberated, or do you want protection from Wormcoil Engines? If we would have named that, we would have easily won this game. So sometimes the little decisions like that just matter. All right, we're back for match number 2 here. Opponent, we are on the play for this one, which is nice. Taking a look at our opening hand. We have 2 lands, couple of Bitter Reunions, Creativity, Bolt, so seems like a pretty reasonable hand overall. We just lead on that and pass. Our opponent goes Scalding Tarn, playing Goblin Guide. So Goblin Guide swings. In response to the trigger here, we set up for a Bolt. We thought see hand of Eidolon, Boros Charm, Lightning Bolt, Swift Spear. Eidolon would probably cause us the most problems here, so it probably makes the most sense, although we're still taking a boatload of damage from Swift Spear and Lightning Bolt, especially with Stomping Ground being our other land. Honestly, if this was the playline that I was going to go for, I probably should have fetched Triome last game, or last turn, maybe taking the damage from Goblin Guide here, but, you know, downside of these 3 and 4 color decks is sometimes you do take a lot of damage from your lands, so take Eidolon, which I figured was the correct take. Opponent looks like they might just be on like a Naya Burn list. They draw Eidolon anyway. We have to cast Bitter Reunion into Eidolon. We pitch a Fable to Mirror Breaker, playing out that. So next turn, if our opponent taps off of Bolt, which it looks like they will, we'll get the opportunity to resolve Archon. Downside to this here, we'll go back to 8. They have to sacrifice a creature. We draw Thoughtseize, which isn't the best, obviously. Opponent goes ahead and attacks. We block, because otherwise we're dead, and our opponent concedes. So it was nice to win that game. One of the downsides of these mana bases, both in the Jund version and the 4 and 5 color mana base, obviously you're more vulnerable to aggressive decks like Burn, especially that have reach that don't, get interacted with your creature stuff as much. But that said, you manage to get an Archon in play, the game usually is pretty easy from there. Alright, taking a look at our sideboarding for game number 2. One card we could consider bringing in would be copies of Nature's Claim. Potentially blow up things like Eidolon. Maybe they'll bring in Vortex. But that's not as relevant against a deck like this as opposed to something like Cascade. Whirling Vortex, that is. As far as the rest of the options, we did board down a little bit on the graveyard plan, as they might bring in something like Sanctifier and Beck as well, keep us from persisting if they even think about that angle of attack, which they should, given the fact that they saw a Bitter Reunion out of us. But let's take a look at our opening hand. This hand has a lot of early interaction and a creativity. However, I don't think it has enough lands to operate, so I probably would mulligan this hand. Okay, and I end up keeping it. Don't know if I agree with that decision, but, well, in hindsight, I don't know if I agree with that decision, but we get bailed out, draw another land. Our opponent plays an Eidolon. We just bolt the Swift Spear here. We get Blood Crypt and Fatal Push here. Once again, taking a boatload of damage. Opponent just does the thing and has yet another Eidolon. We bolt it. We potentially could have Thoughtseize there. Bitter Reunion coming down the pike here. They suspend the Riftbolt. We cast Bitter Reunion. So we know for sure that we're going to won during our following turn. And they have obviously no cards in hand. So we're just going to play this tapped and kind of hope to, I don't know, rip a Dwarven Mine, I guess, off the top would be our best draw. Opponent hits us with a Riftbolt. Attacks with Goblin Guide, gives us a Bloodstained Mire. We still have one more draw step. We cast Fabled, potentially buy some time. Doesn't seem like the best of ideas, but it's what we can do here. And opponent just draws the bolt, so. Downside of this list sometimes, I do wonder if I was supposed to keep that opening hand. Obviously, we had a lot of the early interaction. We had Bolt, Push, Thoughtseize. I don't know that I like leaving in Thoughtseize in this style of matchup, but there are enough cards that sometimes you just need to swipe a Boros Charm or an Eidolon. But that said, generally you're fetch shocking to do that, so in hindsight, I might have brought in copies of Nature's Claim just to have more answers to Eidolon in particular. I don't think they're going to bring in Roiling Vortex against us, but it is something you potentially could see some Burn players bring in to help prevent life gain from Archon. But said, see if we can win game number 3. Looks like I made a set adjustment, boarding out some Thoughtseizes for some Nature's Claims, boarding out a Renin 6 as well. Another card we could have considered bringing in is Boseiju just to answer Eidolon. But taking a look at this opening hand, it's really awkward. We have Boseiju and Dwarven Mine. Sure, we have Creativity and Bitter Reunion, but we really need a fetch land to turn this hand into something useful. This hand should probably be a mulligan. And of course I keep it. The benefit of hindsight. Okay, opponent leads on that into Goblin Guide again. We hit a Dwarven Mine, which not the best, but we get a fetch land, which does help us work out a little bit, but obviously we're taking a boatload of damage here. Opponent has a bolt. Really shouldn't be putting this much effort into killing a Renin 6, but, you know, buys us some time potentially. Opponent bolts our face. They have Eidolon, which is fine. They go to hit us with a Goblin Guide. We bolt, or Boseiju the Eidolon. Presume fetch basic mountain here and bolt the Goblin Guide. So we're not in a terrible spot here, although they have yet another Goblin Guide in the post board. Not post board, post whatever. We go for creativity here, hoping they don't have a bolt lined up, which they do, unfortunately. Okay. Opponent does the thing. They find an Eidolon, which isn't really that big of a deal. We play a Dwarven Mine, get an Archon into play, and they have Path to Exile. So we go for creativity twice and kind of swing and a miss. So at this point, you know, we're pretty much locked out of the game. So our opponent had the appropriate interaction. That said, the one thing I will say about our opponent's line of play, I really don't think Eidolon or Riftbolt and Goblin Guide going after Run-in 6 is the correct thing. As someone who basically specializes in Modern Burn, Run-in 6 is a card you don't care about until its ultimate is relevant. So you can largely ignore Run-in 6 for the first 3 or 4 turns it's in play, and just go face. You know, maybe our opponent was hoping to stick us on lands because they saw us, you know, with the awkward opening of Dwarven Mine into Fetch Shock Stomping Grounds. Maybe they were hoping to catch us a little bit on mana. That said, you know, if our opponent didn't have Bolt plus Path here, we would be in a lot better shape. But, you know, they did, and they won the game. So, things to learn when you're playing creativity, when and when not to go for it, and that's obviously a lesson I still have to work on. Back for our third match with Jund Creativity. Can we finally pick up that elusive match win? Taking a look at this opening hand, this is a much better balanced opening hand than some of the ones that I've kept so far in this video. Thoughtseize and Bolt, early interaction into Run-in 6, Fable to Mirror Breaker. The only thing we're really missing from this being a perfect hand is creativity. Fable should help us to get there. But we lead on. Opponent leads on Boseiju into Luxador Giada's Gift. So likely Devoted Druid at this point. Could be some weird Planeswalker build, but most likely a variant of that, or Devoted Druid combo. So we lead on Thoughtseize, and sure enough, their Devoted Druid combo. Don't really care about Batterskull, don't really care about Viridian Longbow. Surge of Saga could potentially be annoying if we end up on the Persist game plan. Maybe they have some type of main deck graveyard hate. But I think the main take here is Devoted Druid. And I take Viridian Longbow. That makes no sense whatsoever. I guess because I had the Bolt, maybe. But I still think maybe I'm supposed to take Devoted Druid there. We draw a Terminate as well. Going to hope our opponent wastes the turn trying to equip this here. So this is infinite mana for our opponent if this equip happens to work. So we go ahead and bolt them. Maybe getting a little bit too cute here, but we did get them to waste some mana. Let's get to fetch a Xytor's Permanent Ground here. We go fetch probably Basic Mountain here. Get Fabled Mirror Breaker down. Get that rolling, finally getting some pressure plus card selection going, because we really need to find a creativity or a persist. That said, we're going to find out if our opponent has a graveyard hate piece right here. Instead, they get Haywire Might, which not terrible, I guess. This keeps us from getting the card selection that we want so badly. We get a Dwarven Mine. Go ahead and Run-in 6. Get a fetch land, terminate the construct. Get our early pressure going here. Starting to stack up treasures so we can potentially cast this Archon in a turn or two. Opponent is getting close to casting that Batterskull. They play Giver of Runes, Shadow Spear. Last card in their hand is a Batterskull. We go ahead and draw another Run-in 6. Opponent with an odd time to activate their thing, which seems a little bit weird if they're on a Batterskull plan, but our opponent didn't block there, which I guess they really can't get away with because of Run-in 6 potentially pinging them there. So they find another Urza's Saga, equip to Shadow Spear, don't attack, so they're hoping to keep us from attacking at this point. We get another, draw yet another Archon. presume we're going to cast Archon here and just kind of blow them to Kingdom Come with a hard cast Archon, sure. And our opponent concedes to that. We're back for game number 2 here. Taking a look at our sideboarding plan. Looks like we brought in the Fatal Pushes to pair with our removal. Brought in the Emrakul's and the copies of Sanctifier. Sarah's Emissary, sorry. I keep saying Sanctifier because I think of Sanctifier and Beck. Brought out a couple of Archons. I guess the reason for this is Sanctifier and Beck is quite likely out of our opponent's deck. So being able to reanimate a Sanctifier, or Sarah's Emissary, protection from creatures, really their infinite combo can't do much from there. They'd have to have actual removal spells, which they might bring in Path or something, but if you do that with creatures, then they can't exile it with Solitude should they happen to run that their list. They can't kill you with Walking Ballista, etc. So, and we brought in Emrakul, which I'm not sure why I did, but you know, I guess it pairs quite nicely with the plan. But yeah. Anywho, taking a look at our opening hand, we have Thoughtseize, Renin 6. This hand feels like a pretty easy mulligan. This hand is also probably a mulligan. Sure, you could rely on possibly drawing a second land to go Thoughtseize into Bitter Reunion. We also have a Fatal Push. So maybe you could argue keeping this hand. And it looks like I do keep this hand. So, alright. Don't know if I agree with that, but once again, one land, bit risky. Opponent leads on Giver of Runes. We draw the second land. Go ahead, cast Thoughtseize, see Devoted Druid and Solitude. Gotta take Devoted Druid here because it's going to be hard to kill through the Giver of Runes. It starts with the beatdown plan. We're probably going to cast Bitter Reunion next turn. Probably should have gotten Stomping Ground, although our life total is a little bit low here already. Just to keep our mana as much in check as possible. It's amazing how much damage you take with these decks with Fetching and Shocking and everything. So, and our opponent looks like they are on the make some Construct tokens. They get a Giada's Gift, which is interesting. Swing for 3. We Fatal Push the Giver of Runes here. We draw Sarah's Emissary, not ideal. We know they have the Solitude in hand, so I guess I was playing around them drawing a white card at this point. They hit us for 2 here. Play a Giver of Runes, sure. Get a Dwarven Mine. Beseiju. We go ahead and Creativity for 2 here, I'm presuming. Playing around that Solitude in hand. They cast Veil of Summer, which kind of annoying, but also whatever. We hit Sarah's Emissary Emrakul, use protection from creatures, so now they're just going to be dead. So, and they concede as they have no outs to Sarah's Emissary protecting Emrakul and Emrakul wiping their board. So, nice to pick up a win. A couple takeaways from, overall looking at these decks. I don't have... Most of my experience with Creativity historically has been with the old Velomachus version. I haven't played a ton of Creativity since it's moved more towards the Archon version, the 4 and 5 color variants. So, as far as the nuances of the deck, I certainly need some more work. But as far as the general pointers of the deck, mana base is very painful. So you gotta be mindful of when you're fetching, shocking. Gotta be a little bit more careful with keeping your opening hands sometimes, as this deck can definitely have some high variance things, especially when you're going with both the reanimation plan and the creativity plan. You think you have a little bit wider range of hands you can potentially keep. Bitter Reunion, nice card. A bit of a filler in these versions, or in some of the other versions, but here it's kind of important towards being able to pitch cards we can't cast. But yeah, it's certainly a very powerful deck. A little bit different. If things have broken a little bit differently, that Tron matchup could have been a little bit better. But overall, we went 1 and 2 in the matches we saw played, and I think overall I went 1 and 4 in the league, as I was definitely learning how to play this deck on the fly. Now, while I have watched several streamers and such play creativity is a little bit more nuanced in what it's doing, and your opponent's understanding what you're trying to do. Like a burn player having bolt and path at the right time to kill our tokens. All that adds up over time. So, things you learn from the deck. Deck mana base is painful. Learning when to go for it, when not to go for it. Obviously, the other version plays a little bit better game of control than this version does. Has a little bit better card selection. But, the Gen version does have a little bit less painful mana base, although they're both very painful. And Archon's a heck of a Magic card. It helps to have Sarah's Emissary as a backup in the sideboard, both against extraction effects, things like Altered Ego, that kind of Narcomentia, those kind of stuff. Necromentia, sorry. Anything can extract potentially your threats. It's nice to have alternative threats. Emrakul, really the only answer in the format to it is Solitude, but Solitude's a heck of a Magic card that sees a lot of play. So, hence why you see the Sarah's Emissaries pair with it. And Emrakul also gives you outs to decks like Mill. But, yeah, this deck is very powerful. It's certainly one of the top 5 decks in the format. Maybe not necessarily the Jund variant of it, but the 4 and 5 color version. Advantages to that version, you get to play things like Teferi for, counterspell matchups. You get to play things like Leyline Binding, etc. Advantages of this version, it's a little bit easier to be on the reanimation plan. And your mana base is a little bit less clunky and a little bit less painful, but you're still playing a ton of shock lands. You're still playing Dwarven Mines, so you're still vulnerable to Blood Moon and whatnot. So both have their strengths and advantages. I know people that have done well with both, but we wanted to try out Jund here on the channel. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe if you like these informative modern deck guides and gameplay, and hope to see you for the next video.